First of all, my apologies to everybody who, one, went to OL2, and two, has been sitting here for a little while. This has been quite a lot of effort to try and get this to work. So if this runs kind of smoothly from about here onwards, I'm going to be very, very pleased. So this is a talk that I've been threatening to do for quite some time, because it kind of fits into the larger sort of swathe of content that I've been delivering, particularly when we go back to looking at the talk on fear and also the talk on Batman Arkham, which I gave in the first term, in the first season, if you will. I mean, well, yes, we got renewed. Except I decide whether it's renewed or not. But it all comes down to the fact that people actually turn up for these talks. So if you guys didn't turn up, I wouldn't have bothered. So on that note, thank you for turning up and thus continuing to justify why I do this. So talking about Halo, the actual title, Outsmarting the Covenant, which isn't the greatest of titles, I'll concede, came up about August of last year. And it was one that I've been wanting to do for quite some time because, as we'll see as we go through it, Bungie are actually really, really smart. And Bungie do a lot of really, really interesting things in terms of level design, in terms of memory management, in terms of AI, which gave me an actual newfound appreciation for the Halo series that, as a player when it came out, I didn't actually have. And so the longer that I've been maturing, I suppose, as a lecturer, researcher, etc., and as a gamer, I've really came to appreciate what Halo does in a way that's, I'd say, really, really different compared to what a lot of other systems do. And subsequently, Halo, notably 2 and 3, are actually carried on quite a legacy in terms of game development. I can't really say much about it nowadays, though, because, let's face it, Bungie have been rather quiet in the last few years. This is what happens when you get swallowed up by a big evil publisher who doesn't like you to talk about your work. Activision. Subsequently, I've actually had zero interest in Destiny at all. It doesn't really catch me as something that's new or interesting. And, I mean, let's say there's probably some people in here that are like, no, I disagree with you, or, totally right on. But Halo continues to be interesting to me now. And even I think what 343 Industries are doing seems to be continuing on in that trend, though we're focusing more on the earlier games because a lot of what 343 are doing is sort of continuing on what Bungie already established, but also the fact that 343 haven't been as vocal on their development methods, whereas Bungie used to be very, very vocal about what they did. Go back and have a look at any of the GDC presentations, the vaults from about 2003 to about 2007. Halo talks, Halo talks, Halo talks, Halo talks. They love talking about what they did. So, without further ado, let's get into it. As is customary, I've got to do a quick overview of the Halo series, and then we'll start looking at what they actually do. How does the AI work? And notably looking at some of the transitions, but some of the weird little design decisions that they made. And then we'll actually get on to this in combat, and we'll let people play it for a little bit. We're going to focus on Halo 2 Remastered from Master Chief Collection, which should be good fun. I just finished playing it. I now subsequently, funnily enough, like I say, I've never actually played Halo 2 until recently, and now Halo 3 makes so much more sense. Seriously, it actually completely changed my opinion of the third one, because I'm like, I get it now. I actually know what I'm supposed to be doing. It was the complete opposite of the Call of Duty approach, where they smack it over the back of your head and they go, he's bad. And you go, why is he bad? Because he's from another country that's not American. Except for Call of Duty Modern Warfare, which is the story of how, two British men essentially fix every cock-up that the American army can make. Go back and play that game again. It's pretty much how British people are awesome and American people are just make an ass of everything. Sorry, America. Just realise that the internet will probably watch this video at some point in time. And then we'll finish up just kind of looking at what impact what I'm going to talk about today has had in subsequent series, but also that actually this technology is beginning to change over time, and a lot of new techniques, well, not even new techniques, but existing techniques are now being sort of looked at once again with fresh eyes, because they realize that, oh my God, this is actually far easier to implement than we originally imagined. So, without further ado, let's talk about Halo. Yay! And let me see, is there anybody here that's not played Halo or is not a fan of the series? Anyone? I think we actually got a couple of people for whom these slides are really, really useful. I realise this for every talk I give. There's always like a handful of people that are maybe like, nah. But, yep, I mean, most people know this already. It is probably one of the most prominent franchises that currently exist in gaming. It has existed since the 6th generation, and that's pretty much for everybody here that's under the age of 30, because we want you to appreciate that there actually were 5 other generations of consoles before the Xbox came out. You guys are going, oh my God, Xbox, PlayStation 1, those things are so old. PlayStation 2, so old. And it's like, no, actually, they're nowhere near as old as you think. Amazingly, they've actually managed to sell over 60 million copies. This doesn't include up to the Halo, this is before the Halo Master Chief Collection came out, so they've probably added a few more million onto it. And it's the core intellectual property of Microsoft's gaming portfolio. And every Microsoft system, whether it's been the Xbox 360, the Xbox One, even the PC, have all, and Windows Phone, some of us do own them, by the way. Every one of them has actually had a Halo title released on the system. Although I always find it kind of funny because the game was actually originally destined for Mac. And I don't know how many of you have ever seen this, but I remember this when it came out. This is actually the original launch trailer for Halo. And this premiered at the Macworld conference in 1999 from Steve Jobs himself.
And so I'm very happy to welcome on the stage Jason Jones, who is the co-founder of Bungie and the Halo project lead. Halo is the name of this game, and we're going to see for the first time Halo. Welcome to it.
Everything you're about to see is being rendered in real time on Macintosh using OpenGL.
OpenGL? It's a bit weird, isn't it? What was quite interesting about that is that One, it was originally intended as a real-time strategy game. It became a first-person shooter over time. Second, well, then of course there's the fact that it's being rendered in OpenGL, which you wouldn't really expect for a game that eventually came out on a Microsoft system. But, so what happened was within weeks of this announcement, Microsoft bought them. And immediately said, right, okay, no Mac version. Eventually, there was actually a Mac version of Halo Combat Evolved, the first game, years after its release. But it seemed as if there was this kind of weird tug of war where I think Bungie were kind of waiting for Apple to step up and go, no, we'll buy you because you said you were going to release this. And by the time they realized that, oh no, Microsoft are going to buy them up, it was too late. And the other thing that I learned recently I watched one of the documentaries about the making of Halo 2 actually, was the soundtrack and the now kind of iconic choir that plays throughout that trailer. They threw that together on a weekend because they knew they were going to demo it that week. And the week before, they're like, we need some sort of music to play over the trailer. And so I forget the name of the gentleman who was the composer of the game, said, I want to do this orchestral. I want to have a choir. And he just came up with this notion of a choir, and on a plane just kind of came up with a rough idea of what the music was, flew into LA, recorded it, and then went, right, done. And it's funny how that's now such a big component of the actual game, that you hear that opening piece of music, and immediately you go, Halo, Halo, Halo. You know exactly what it is. It's kind of ironic as well, given it's like a choir, and you think like kind of this choir music is the sign of killing hundreds and hundreds and thousands of aliens in the name of peace. But I'm not going to come here and kind of preach on that one. So there's been a lot of games in the series since that original video, and this was all the ones that I could think of off the top of my head. Naturally, the very first one, Combat Evolved, on the original Xbox, as was Halo 2, then Halo 3 on the Xbox 360, as well as Halo Wars, which was actually a real-time strategy game. Halo ODST, or Halo 3 ODST, depending on how you want to phrase it, which is sort of a story that takes place between Halo 2 and 3, and it actually focuses on the orbital drop shock troopers and not on Master Chief as usual. Halo Reach, which is the prequel to Halo Combat Evolved, and it's all about the fall of the planet Reach, where pretty much all the Spartan soldiers seem to die, except for the Master Chief. It seems like there was this whole army of badass soldiers who then all died, and there was only one guy left, and we're like, okay, we'll make the series about you. I never finished that one, actually. The anniversary re-release of Halo Combat Evolved, which came out on the Xbox 360. Halo 4, which was also on the Xbox 360, which is a completely different storyline from the first three. It's sort of moved on from the original story arc. And so far, I'm actually really enjoying it. I played Halo 4 recently, quite liked it. Halo Spartan Assault, which was a twin-stick shooter on pretty much every Microsoft platform. It's not very good. But there is a sequel coming out this year. And also was it Halo 5 Guardians is coming out pretty soon. But we're going to kind of focus on 2 and 3. Because this is probably, this is one part of the kind of Halo saga that was best documented in terms of its AI implementations. And Damien Isla, who was one of the lead designers at the time, used to talk an awful lot about it. He's since moved on and is doing other things. So Halo is kind of renowned in the sense that it brought a lot of innovations to the genre for good or ill. I'm going to say that in advance, because some of them I'm not a big fan of. Now, if you look at it in terms of what it brought to console gaming, I think the two most obvious things is, one, it actually improved the control and fidelity of games for first-person shooters. Now, some of us go back to remembering early first-person shooters such as Doom on the Super Nintendo. We don't talk about that. Ever. It's one of the most horrendous ports of a game I've ever seen. And this is coming from somebody who plays Doom annually, just to kind of relive my youth a little bit. But also things like GoldenEye, which GoldenEye was great at the time, but in terms of what we now consider to be typical first-person shooter controls, didn't really achieve that. You could actually play it dual stick if you had two N64 controllers. And you could plug it in as two controls, and then you could actually play it like that. That kind of worked, but not greatly, because also the N64 stick, as some of you may recall, was not that great at actually kind of managing that on that kind of micro level. Then you've got stuff like Turok as well, that also came out on the N64, Turok Dinosaur Hunter, which tried to do the same thing again, but ultimately Dave gives the thumbs up there. It was a fun game, I quite liked it. But yeah, the controls just weren't there yet, and Halo actually brought that, I think, in many respects, that coming out of the PC genre, where, you know, first-person shooters were pretty much well established as like the core genre. I'd probably say next to RTS games that PC could do that console games could not. Then there's also actually bringing online gaming and actually making online games fun on a console. Because some of us remember actually playing online games on other systems, like the three of us who ever owned a Sega Dreamcast. And I heard a couple of, oh yeah. Yeah, but yep, you had it. I've still got my Dreamcast. I love my Dreamcast. It's so good. But trying to play Phantasy Star Online on a, 14K modem. Oh my God. I never got past like the first two missions because then my internet would just choke up because there was too many players in the scene at one time and it's just going, nah, dude, I can't do this. And it just died on me every time. Oh, yeah. Or my mum picked up the phone and called someone. Some people just don't appreciate how good they had it when you're sitting playing online games and then you just hear the phone getting picked up. Get off the phone! You've been disconnected. We used to actually, in my house, we used to have a separate phone line. Because my dad was self-employed, he was a software developer, so he used to have his internet line and then the phone line. The only time it would ever cause a problem was if somebody then tried to fax us. But, such a 90s concept, faxing. What was that again? But no, I mean, actually the Halo series really helped solidify that, and certainly what is now Xbox Live is built largely around the successes of Halo 2. In terms of game design, I think the two key things, what Bungie themselves refer to as the Golden Triangle. I don't understand why they call it the Golden Triangle, but it comes down to weapons, notably only having two of them, and you can only alternate between them, having grenades and melee attacks. Now that's something we kind of take as par for the course nowadays, like any Call of Duty game. Call of Duty is built, when you actually think about it, Call of Duty borrows so heavily from Halo. The only thing that they don't take is shields. So they've got rechargeable health and they have the Golden Triangle, and that's how that's how Call of Duty works. And subsequently, Call of Duty has been such a big success that that's how pretty much 90% of all other first-person shooters are designed. And it's only when things come along like, say, a Wolfenstein: The New Order, which tried to do something different, and it's actually a bit more old school, and I loved it as a result. I thought it was great. Not a classic, but it was so fresh to actually allow me to dual-wield shotguns. What do you mean I can carry 8 different guns? This is amazing. So there's that. I mean, there's in that respect. But I also look at it from other kind of technical innovations, notably AI. But it actually changed the format and scope of first-person shooter battles. That we started off quite big. And if you go back to the days of sort of Doom and Hexen, Heretic. Hexen's the sequel to Heretic. Make sure I get them in the right order. But also then, some of you guys are like, what are you on about? Google it when you go home. Then things like Duke Nukem 3D. But these were always kind of larger scale, and we could get away with that. And then what happened was they started to shrink inwards. Notably, things like, particularly when GoldenEye came along. GoldenEye actually pulls the scope right in because you're more enclosed, you're in tighter environments. And also when we were building more larger 3D games, it had to tighten up a little bit. And then Halo sort of throws that concept out the window because it's got very large open environments. And the thing that's really interesting about that is you need all these different types of enemy characters, but also there's the fact there's this vehicular combat that goes on. So you can jump in and out of a Warthog, but so can the bad guys. The bad guys can do that as well. But even if they don't, they have to respond to the fact you're now in a vehicle and go, well, what do I do? What do I do? How do I respond to this? Because if they continue to act in the same fashion as they did, it takes the fun out. Well, it can take the fun out of it. You might find it more enjoyable because they're going, derp, a derp, a derp, and you're just like running over them. But you want them to be more engaging. And so this was like a big challenge, I think, in terms of what Bungie were trying to achieve, because they wanted to have all these different characters, all these different AI bots that existed in the world. They wanted to have some sort of core intelligence, but they're also quite varied. And if you play a lot of Halo, you'll note that different characters behave in different ways. And notably in 2 and 3, they worked on this really hard. Cope with the complexity of land and air combat. So what do I do if the Master Chief gets into a vehicle? How do I respond to that? But also, if my vehicle is damaged, can I potentially try and get out of it? They don't do it that often. The other thing is responding to the environment around them. Because sometimes, and this is something we don't talk about as much in this talk, otherwise it'd be another hour longer. But Bungie do an awful lot of work in encounter dynamics and encounter design, where each battle is essentially like a dance, and it goes through certain phases. And that subsequently informs the AI of how to behave in accordance with it. So let's get on to it. AI of Halo. Yay. And this is when I just get to abuse concept art for the rest of this talk. Mostly because I really like all the concept art that they have in Halo. So if you kind of go back to sort of the state of things as they were, sort of early 2000s, that a lot of AI in kind of game development in general was focused on the use of finite state automata, or finite state machines. And this is a practice that still persists, to the point, for those of you who turned up to the Batman talk and also the Fear talk will know that we still use finite state machines, and they're still very, very effective at what they do. But one of the problems with finite state machines is that, excuse me, the level of complexity can grow very quickly. They're good to actually visually debug your behavior you're creating, and I'll have an example in a minute to show. But it becomes very difficult to manage that as the scope of all potential behaviors your character can have increases. How do you debug it? How do you manage it? All these weird edge cases that occur, it gets a bit hairy. And this can even extend to what's known as hierarchical finite state machines, or HFSMs. And this is where we're actually abstracting a finite state machine. So a state can then have states beneath it. In fact, each state is a finite state machine in itself, which sounds all right until you try and implement it, and then it just gets a bit... So here's an example of what I'm talking about. So traditionally, when we talked about this in the previous talk, that up the top, those blue states, that's the entire finite state machine. And for those of you who didn't come to the earlier talk, I'll just give a kind of brief synopsis that you're in one of these blue states, and that state tells you what that character's supposed to do at that point in time, like run away, or attack, or get to cover, things like that. And certain events will happen in the world which cause these transitions between them. So the obvious example that I gave is if you go back to like Pac-Man, that Pac-Man's ghosts will always try and catch the player. They actually try and chase the player until the player consumes a power pill, at which point it flips from a chase state to an evade state and tries to run away. And then, of course, that power pill will eventually dissipate, at which point they revert back to their chase behavior and they'll go back to chasing the player. But what you start getting when you really get into more complex examples is that this state up here is actually an entire subsystem in itself. And then you can really flesh out that behavior into something a lot more granular and a lot more interesting. But subsequently, you've got all this complexity, because you need to then debug not only the top machine, the top finite state machine, but also then make sure that this doesn't cause any weird edge cases, and transitions out of this state machine into that state machine don't cause problems as well. And it gets really, really hairy after a while if you haven't implemented it and tested it thoroughly. And particularly if you're trying to create sort of dynamic and emergent behavior, this can be a bit of a problem. So Halo tried to focus on bringing something new. And what Bungie did was they actually adopted something that's very, very similar to hierarchical finite state machines. And they're commonly referred to nowadays as behaviour trees. Now, at the time, they actually still use the same terms sort of interdependently. But I think there is actually a very important distinction to make when you look at them, in the sense that they're both doing the same thing, that they're actually creating a hierarchy of behavior so that we know we can kind of burrow down into a particular part of this hierarchy to understand what we should be doing at a certain point in time. But finite state machines, if we had that example from a minute ago, finite state machines explicitly state, each state knows what the logic is to transition out of it. And says, okay, right, I'm finished in this state, or something's happened. I'm going to move from this state to that state over there, because I know how to manage that bit. Whereas behavior trees don't really do that. And if we go back to this diagram here, that, like I said, the decision logic in each state of a finite state machine is embedded in the state itself. And it goes, okay, I'm doing my thing. Oh, something's changed, right, okay, I know now that I should go to this state over there. And you force the transition in the finite state machine. Behavior trees don't really do that. Instead, they actually sort of decouple the decision logic from the actual behavior code. And that can make your life so much easier. Because if you can just build the behaviors, plug them in the tree in the right place, it just starts kind of clicking and it all starts sort of coming together. So let's kind of get, this is the technical part. Once we get by the technical part, we can go and play some games, right? We can play some Halo. So a behavior tree is actually, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's a tree structure, and anybody who's a programmer will be kind of familiar with the notion of like binary trees and stuff like that, binary search trees, where you have a root node, and then, don't worry, for anybody who's not a programmer, we have diagrams. These images will help. And you start off with a root node. And what you do is you can actually start from the root and expand out and focus on a particular path through the tree and say, I'm going to execute this behavior at this point in time. And what you do is you have each node in that tree right down to the bottom. And the bottom nodes are known as leaves, because it's meant to be a tree, right? Work with me. These nodes can then correspond to unique behaviors or actually force particular execution within that tree. So a simple example, which I'll walk through this example in a little bit, but I want to just kind of visualize this for anybody who doesn't really know what I'm talking about. The very top one there, that's the root node of this. That's the root of the tree. And what we do is we actually have these arrows branching out. And you see here, this is actually just one child of that top node. But then this one here has 3 children, and this one has 2 children at the bottom. So you actually are supposed to navigate it from the leftmost to the rightmost. What's known as an in-order traversal. So you would start here, up the top, and you would go to the first child, come back out, go to the second child, and its first child, back out, round and down, over here, then come up to that one, and then we'll visit those 2 at the end. And when I walk through that, when I actually explain what that behavior does in a minute, that'll make an awful lot more sense. So in each frame of the game, notably in Halo, we typically pay attention to which node of the tree we're actually in. And I go, right, well, I'm currently doing this. And that can depend on some code that you're running in the background. For animators, this is quite important because the animation needs to complete. Sometimes it might actually be we need to interrupt the animation, which then causes this. This is where, particularly for AI programmers working with artists, is really important because you then have to start blending your animations to kind of fit these transitions in behavior. And particularly for those of you who were at the Batman talk, will remember how important that was. Certainly with Rocksteady, they treated that very, very seriously. So once we know that a certain behavior or animation is completed, we can transition to another state. Now, in order to do that, your system always needs to have really good memory management, so we know exactly where we are in the tree. Now, bear in mind, and this was actually something that I'm not going to talk about at great length tonight, but was certainly an issue for Bungie, was they had like 20, 30, 40 characters on the map, and they had to manage the behavior trees of every single character. And they did this with some really, really tight memory management. But also, you need to have what is commonly known nowadays as a blackboard system. And it's like an oracle of the world. So you can ask about where everything is relative to the player, or relative to the character itself. It's like, okay, where's the nearest bit of cover to me? It's over there, it's this far away, this is the heading relative to you. Okay, good, right, okay. Where's the player? Oh, he's over there, right, okay. Because these pieces of information can help dictate which particular route through that tree it's going to take. Now, if we have a quick look at what I'd say there's like 3 types of nodes. There can be other types of nodes, but typically in a behavior tree we focus on 3 of them. So the first one is a leaf, and that's like the extremity, like right out the edge of that tree. Now these are typically just a behavior. So it's like attack player, get to cover, flee even, get in a vehicle, get out of a vehicle. So really simple things that kind of, once you execute numerous leaf nodes in sequence, you get something really clever out of it. But then you got things like selector nodes, and a selector node is, for programmers, it's an if statement. For non-programmers, what it means is, based upon what's happening in the world, I'm either going to do one thing or I'm going to do something else. So if the Master Chief is in a vehicle, I am going to run. If he's not in a vehicle, I'm maybe going to try and attack him, because maybe he's driving up in his Scorpion tank. And of course, you don't want the AI to go, charge, because that makes no sense whatsoever. If it goes, oh, fuck, shit, and then it runs away, that helps. So you want to make sure that illusion of intelligence is maintained. And a sequence is really straightforward. All it is just, see all my children, execute them in sequence from left to right. What was so funny about that? Executing children. Oh, okay. I don't think, I'm so emotionally disconnected from this. I swear to God, I swear to God. I'm trying to teach you something here. And this can allow for, just having these sequences where you activate a leaf node. Is that good enough? Can then allow for kind of more complex behaviors to get put together. So if I go back to this, what this says is, so the sequence is, work through this whole thing from left to right. It's a behavior tree for entering a doorway. That's all it is. So it goes, right, first of all, if I'm going to open a door, I need to be near the door. It's not like, if I walk up, if I'm standing here going, doesn't make sense. So in order for opening a door to work, you actually need to walk towards the door. So we get to the door, and then there's a selector. And what that is it says, right, okay, you can do one of three things. That one, or that one. So the far left is just open the door. So it might be depending on the character. Say you're playing, your character is just like a standard, UNSC grunt. He's like, oh my God, it's the Master Chief, let me open the door for you. Job done. Easy. So he's opened the door. Or it might be, oh my God, the door's locked. You tried to open the door and the AI goes, don't worry, I'll open the door for you. So he unlocks the door and then he opens it, because once you've unlocked it, you need to open it. And of course, this is now to the left, and it's a separate subtree of the selector, so it can't use that anymore. It goes, right, okay, we need to unlock the door, and then we open the door. Say your character's a badass, or it's like an enemy, it's part of the Covenant. You don't want it to be opening the door, because it seems far too polite. Now let me just open up this UNSC door here. Oh, look, there's the enemy. You want it to be a bit more aggressive, so maybe it runs up and just kind of kicks the door down, or it blows it up or something like that. And this is something we'll come back to, is actually how different types of characters can execute the same behavior in different ways. Now typically, once you have either opened the door, unlocked and opened the door, or smashed the door, we need to then walk through the door. I'm really just pulling out something really simple that you do every day, but you don't really think about it on this kind of level. And then, now this is the one part of this diagram I don't necessarily agree with, is that when you get to the end, close the door. But that's running on the assumption of what type of character it is. Because it might be, here you go, Master Chief, on you go. Feeling really good about itself. But then if you've smashed the door, you can't close it. It's like having Arnold Schwarzenegger try and close doors behind him. It doesn't work. He smashes the whole door apart, and then he's just like trying to put what's left of it back on the frame. And then it just kind of falls over. Well, that doesn't make any sense. So you could actually expand this tree a lot more to say, based upon, if the door is smashed, don't bother trying to close it. Or if you really want, you might want to relock that door. So you go, oh God, right, hang on. He went through, I'll close the door again. When then you end up with those annoying bits of level design where you've went through a door and then you try to go back through it and it won't let you. Like, no! And you're playing on Legendary and you've got caught in a bad checkpoint and you can't backtrack and you're dead, you're doomed. So, how does all that work when you put it into a live gunfight? Now, the first thing I want to do is actually get some gameplay on the go first and let you just see it happening. And then, afterwards, we can spend a little time kind of pulling it apart and actually talking about what it's doing under the hood. So, with that, I believe Richard has been vying to get the controller to play Halo since I actually said I would do a Halo talk at some point. Now, you can actually just go and sit over there and do it. He's like, I'm here now. I've run all the way over. Right. Now, do we think this is a good map to play? Because I want to have troop battles. But Metropolis starts off with the Scorpion. It takes a little while to get out the Scorpion. Yeah, it's actually vehicle for most of it.
Oh yeah, let's do Gravemind.
Gravemind.
That's a terrible idea. Yeah, my bosses.
Right, hang on. Clearly we've got some disagreement as to what level we should play of Halo 2. Oh dear. Right, do I just go through each mission in turn and we can just get to vote? I don't think the Heretic's a good one to start on. Yeah, neither is the Armory. Actually, Cairo Station might not be a bad one. It's all right, I'm going to cut it all out in post. We'll just cut the first 10 minutes of gameplay All right, do you want the grave mind? Is that what we're after?
It's not a good.
You steady on.
He's just being evil.
I know, because that starts... Right, which one do we want? High Charity might not be a bad one. Whispering grave mind. All right, what do you think? Well, I want to play one as the Master Chief, so let's avoid any of them that involve the Arbiter.
That's an Arbiter one, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. Outskirts?
Outskirts will work. We will actually get some...
Isn't this the one that has vehicles near the end?
It has the vehicles at the end, but that's fine. If we can get a bit of troop combat to start with and then go into vehicles, that'll work. Here you go. I'm assuming you're just going to go for...
I will change the options since I get...
Yeah, but keep it on low difficulty. We actually want to get some progression, not just watching you screw up the same checkpoint 20 times. Don't put skulls on. Good God. I knew doing a Halo talk was a bad idea. Let's put skulls on. Okay, now, I do actually remember this mission. What's good about this is we do get a little bit at the start when we land into the city. There will be some troop combat, and there's different types as well. So we're not just getting like grunts, we're getting jackals, we'll probably get some elites as well. This is why playing Halo 3 for this talk wasn't actually that suitable, because in Halo 3 they ditch the elites, by and large, for narrative reasons more than anything else. But I really wanted to have the elites because I think they're more interesting. Whee! You want to watch the cutscene? All right. Synchronized oorahing. So really the point of doing this just now is to kind of focus on what these characters are doing during gameplay. So don't be afraid to go in there and get your hands dirty and potentially get yourself killed, because one, we'll all get a laugh out of it. But two, we actually get to see something useful out of it as well. Because as you'll note, when we start getting into this, the characters have different behaviours. The characters respond to events differently. Ooh! Change your controls. Oh, he's inverted as well.
Inverted consoles, but not for PCs.
What? You're weird. You're weird. All right, okay. Also, I'll definitely say it freaked me out when I was playing Halo 4 and suddenly realised I could sprint about a third of the way through the game. So just a bunch of grunts, nothing particularly interesting. Oh, jackals. Now, if I remember right, this sequence you get attacked again and again. You're going to get different types of enemies attacking you repeatedly. So he's down. Now, the thing you'll note when you watch, and anybody who's played a lot of Halo will observe this, the grunts don't tend to attack you. In fact, the grunts tend to be largely defensive. Unless you do something which triggers them to cause them to panic. They're one of the few characters in the game that actually panic based upon what the player does. And it usually revolves around killing something bigger than it. The elites tend to run the show. And usually, most of the grunts, not so much the jackals, but the grunts certainly will follow whatever the elites are actually doing, because as far as they're concerned, they're the group leader. So let's see, where are we going? I'm not going to go into the character history, but it's important to look at, oh, he's actually got aggressive, he tried his luck with you. But notice how they're running away now. They're all kind of running away, they're in a bit of a panic, and that's because one of the elites died. and this is actually implemented into the system, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, that there is a reason for why this happens. And was it how they actually came about with this? Bungie had to really kind of think about it. So already, the grunts have kind of fell behind. Now he's panicking because that elite just died right in front of him. He's like, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? And they even talk like that. It drives me bananas. Really annoys me. Oh God, seeing your controller things. Hold right button to swap. Why would you? No, it's the wrong control scheme. I think you also get some hunters come out and get you in this sequence. But I think you've still got quite a few more of them coming to get you. Was that a request to melee the hunters? No, I think they're coming from the part that you actually started at. So behind you. Yeah, here they come. So some of them are trying to actually attack you straight on. Some of them aren't. Some of them trying to move into cover. They're trying to get into different positions. They're trying to evade. And we see that, sometimes it's not actually that clear. And one of the things that was really interesting, I read about this a while ago, was that one of the things that Bungie spent a lot of time iteratively testing is whether or not players actually observe any differences in behavior at runtime. So, for example, the whole thing that if you kill an elite, the grunts panic. Originally, it was only the grunts within local proximity of the elite that actually panicked. But they noticed that about 95% of players never actually observed this happening. That's why now if you kill one elite who's surrounded by 10 grunts, all the grunts panic. Because you then recognize that something actually occurred. But previously, it was like nobody actually noticed it was happening. Now they're pushing up. Some tried to get away, largely fail. Now the elites are far more aggressive. Go and go for it. Yes. You be dead. The field of view on this is infuriating. It's too small. Oh, you're ready. I think they're being, there you go, they're on the left. But also note, I think one of the other things that's quite cool to see is that different characters will still continue to be, they'll use grenades, they will push up, they will fall back, and it seems to vary per character just how much that fluctuates. Like, the grunts aren't particularly confident. They won't aggressively pursue the player. This changed slightly in Halo 3, and anyone who will note that you do occasionally get a suicidal grunt. They will come at you with a couple of sticky grenades, and they'll try and take you out. And this is down to one of the changes that they made to the behavior tree system in Halo 3, and we'll come up to that in a couple of slides later on. Are you really hiding? Come on. So look at this. Once again, grunts quite happy to push up, quite happy to be a little bit aggressive because they're surrounded by these elites. Not anymore. One elite down. There's also something interesting that we're not getting to see it that much because Richard's too busy killing them all. No, that's part of your job. You're here to kill. And is that particularly with characters like elites and brutes, that when you get them down to like their last few, or you kind of really weaken them, they seem to change tactic. So grunts, jackals, they'll largely run away. They'll largely run away from you. They'll try and avoid you. But elites will charge you. Brutes will charge you. They seem to have a different set of confidence because occasionally, notably in Halo 3, the brutes lose their temper a lot when you get them down to like the last of their health. And again, this is all courtesy of some of the tweaks that they made to the behavior trees in 2, and also subsequently this kind of reconfiguration of the systems in 3. Come on, give us some more bad guys to shoot. Now, the key thing to appreciate is they're all running off exactly the same behavior tree code. They don't get different types of behavior trees. In fact, this is where it's going to be interesting, is that certain characters, such as the hunters, can't do certain things that the elites can do, that the jackals can do. And it actually disables them at runtime and goes, well, you can't do these things because you're of a certain type of character. Are you happy now? Never! Cool. Push up for us. Let's see if we can... so annoying you can't sprint. Keep going, keep going.
So where's the halo wall supposed to be? On now? Not the halo wall
Now you've got a different type of jackal going on there. You've actually got one that's high up with a sniper rifle. So he's trying to take you out. And the thing is that in that respect, his behaviour is going to be different because it's based upon what particular information that he knows about the state. And the state is, I'm not carrying a shield, I'm actually carrying like a rifle and I'm in a different position. So it will focus on trying to find good positions to snipe you and it'll attack from a distance if it can. Now notice how a sudden change in all that behaviour right there. You took out one character and subsequently they're all on you now. It's like, well, wow. That interesting way in which they all react and go, him, he's over there, get the Master Chief sort of thing. And that's coming down to, it's a similar type of behaviour to what, that was a nice shot. It comes back to that same point as earlier when you kill one of the elites, that all the grunts respond to it in kind. It's the same type of thing where a recent event in the world causes a significant change in their behaviour. I hate those things. Nice. Take cover.
Why are most of the Marines Australian?
I'm trying to remember where this is meant to be.
New Mombasa still, haven't
New Mombasa, there we go. Oh yeah, which is like a crater in the third one. Spoiler. For the 3 people in the room who haven't played Halo are just like, the fuck, man. Seriously, giving it all away. Now, there's another quite useful point is, I forgot to actually acknowledge that you've been playing this entire mission with a bunch of other characters. Now, they're using the same behaviour trees. They're using the same setup, they're using the same code, but their objectives are different. And they'll largely try and... Now, the thing is that notice how they don't even kind of like spend too much time around you. It's not like sort of you're the Master Chief and it's like, where you going, man? Where you going? I'm going where you're going. You want to go that way? No, they don't do that. They have their own objective. They respond to what's happening around them. Excuse me. Now, of course, the problem with that is that sometimes they get themselves killed because they're not that smart. They're not designed to be that smart. Subsequently, you can sometimes kill them because they run off and they're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to save the universe. And you just run in like, I'm Master Chief, and throw a grenade, and then they die. What happened? I missed that. What happened? Serves you right. I did tell him to go for it, that is true. Now, it's even more relevant, actually, this notion of like the different characters all using the same system, because if you've played towards the end of the second game, if you don't want to hear the spoiler, cover your ears. There's the sort of civil war that breaks out between the elites and the brutes, and there's several sequences when you're in the Covenant, was it kind of Covenant territory, where they're attacking each other, and you just get sort of caught up in it. Now, this isn't even being, it's not pre-scripted, it's not pre-sequenced that it's always going to happen the same way. It happens in different ways because the AI is just running at runtime. And it's like, okay, just attack this guy, and it knows which types of characters are its enemies. And then you can really mix it up and just be a bit of an idiot by walking into the middle of it, like, hey, how you doing? Remember me, I'm the Master Chief. I'm that guy that all of you originally hated earlier on. They go, you! You're like, shit! And you have to run away from it. So sometimes, like particularly in higher difficulties, it's better to just let them hash it out and then you fight whoever's left. Hey, I didn't say they were that good. Dual wield. You don't want to. Ladies and gentlemen, artificially intelligent flashlight technology. Now, that was 2 different responses to the same grenade throw. And this is something that happens a lot in the series, is that if you hit someone with a sticky grenade, some characters will charge you. Because they go, screw it, I know what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and take you out with me. Others, the second elite that got hit there, just sort of stood there and, boom. So it can actually depend upon what type of character that you're using, what type of character that AI is, and how it's going to respond to that. Because sometimes it's actually just a random toss, and it goes, okay, well, I'm going to do one of these 3 behaviors depending on what's happening. So I think this will be about the last of the troop-based work, and then after this we can actually get some vehicles for a couple of minutes. Towards the end of this mission, it's all vehicle-based. Almost messed that up. All right. Let's do it. Right. We're going to place bets on how long it takes them to flip. I'm giving you about 20 seconds. Woo! So the thing is, characters are going to change behavior at this point because, and this is something, again, we'll come back to this in a little minute, that we have a general indication of what's a good thing or a bad thing to do. But now, a good idea of charging the Master Chief is not a good idea when he's riding when he's driving a warthog and he's got a gun around the back. You go, oh, actually, this is no longer a good idea. I need to reevaluate this. So note how none of them are really pushing up. They're not being overly aggressive. They're actually being largely defensive, hiding behind cover, dodging out the way. If you weren't in that vehicle, this would be a completely different sequence that's happening right now, because they'd feel far more confident in their chances of actually defeating, well, both the Master Chief and all the other troops that are nearby. But of course, that behavior doesn't necessarily exist for everyone, particularly when you're dealing with characters who are hiding up in some of the more defensive positions or enemies that are actually in their own vehicles. They're far more confident about the idea of attacking you, and they'll be far more confident in just staying in their vehicle and hashing it out because they think they can beat you. Idiot. They do, yeah. They can drive it for you if you want. I have zero confidence in any non-player character that drives for me.
I trust them.
Let's see what it's like.
What did he say? Now, the thing that's interesting with this is if they're driving, what's their objective at this point in time? Because it may well be that it's focused purely on eliminating all the enemies nearby, doesn't want to progress any further in the level until everyone's down. Oh, this isn't going to go well. You know, it's actually worth pointing out that all the audio that they play is also kind of tied into their AI system. If they're going to do a certain behavior, sometimes actually what it'll do is just play a bit of audio to go along with it. So, yes, the AI programmers are largely responsible for all those annoying audio clips that are being played right now. Now look how these guys are completely different from what Richard was fighting 2 minutes ago, because all those other, they were on foot, they weren't in vehicles, they were hiding behind cover, they didn't really want to come out and get involved, whereas these guys, because they're all in vehicles, are far more aggressive, they're more willing to actually, you know, take the fight to you. Be careful, don't get run over by the driver.
Okay, it's Halo.
Is that going to blow up?
Maybe. It does have a health. It'll take us like 2 hits and
It's all right, you got the checkpoint, it's all good.
fine.
Famous last words. See, the last time you said everything would be fine. But yeah, completely different setup now. They're being far more aggressive, they're just going for it. Yet there will actually be more troops that appear further in who aren't really going to push up right now because they're not in vehicles. They don't feel good about it. It's like, no, this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea. Ah! How that warthog is not blown up is a mystery. I really have no idea. Surely the driver would have actually just combusted by this point. He'd just be like ash. So how are we doing down there, Chief? Ah! I'm not feeling confident about this at all, I gotta say. There we go. Right, let's call it for that there for now, and we'll go back to some slide action, but give him a round of applause, you did well. Right. I like how that's like two different things happening at the same time. So, when you actually put all this into a live gun battle, everything we've seen is pretty much running off of this. That is what the core behavior tree that exists for all the non-player characters in Halo. And you can see that there are different, so we start off at the root, and typically that previous image we were starting at the top, this time we're actually working from left to right. And you can see that there are different types of like sequences that exist. And it will make that decision at this level based upon what's happening in the game around it. So this is a selector node, essentially. And then it goes into one of 6 possibilities. Now, the top one is vehicle-based, and that's actually a completely different tree in itself. Because it goes, right, I need to deal with vehicles. And vehicles is going to be a different particular point, like route of action I can take. Now, the thing is that some of these behaviors are consistent if you're in a vehicle, but a lot of these will actually be removed at runtime, because it's like, well, you can't really do them because you're in a vehicle. And you can see that actually, now I don't know if you can read these very well, but these correspond to what is the kind of encounter design that Bungie do in the Halo games. So the most obvious thing to do is just an idle behavior. So it's like there's nothing happening, the Master Chief hasn't turned up yet, or maybe I haven't seen him. So it stays in a sort of guarding behavior. Now that can mean very rudimentary pathfinding around a particular area, or it's playing the odd animation. Like you've seen this in so many games when the character's just idle, maybe it scratches the back of its head, checks its gun or something like that, or it just walks backwards and forwards between 2 places. Post-combat, which is after it kills you. And if you've ever wondered whether or not that when you actually die and you have that couple of seconds before the game flips back to your last checkpoint and you noted that the AI kept shooting you, it does it on purpose. So you can see that one of the behaviors is actually just shoot the corpse. Because it goes, the demon is dead, and then it just gets a couple other shots in there to kind of like, yeah, fuck yeah, eat it. And you think, oh, right, that's just buggy code. No, it's doing that on purpose. It's part of its behavior. But also some of them will just run up and check the body to make sure you're dead. And you don't think of it really that much at that time, but it's trying to kind of maintain the experience of what they're doing. There's 2 at the top, which are sort of more on the flip side of that. Rather than you beating them, or them beating you, you're beating them. And there's 2 things, like self-preservation, where they try and figure out, oh my God, I need to get into a defensive kind of tactic. So there's things like throwing grenades, getting into cover, guarding positions that are of interest. And this becomes more and more relevant as the battle is being lost. More characters actually fall back into guarding positions and try and maintain a back line. This is why sometimes when you get up to a point, you'll still find 2 elites hiding out at the back with a bunch of grunts. It's because they actually try and hold a defensive line at the back. There's outright retreating and fleeing, where they just go, screw this noise, I'm out of here. And certainly the grunts are the most evident of doing that. But then engaging, and this is the main kind of combat behavior tree that it runs. And you can see that this can change, depending on what they want to do. They can throw grenades at you, they can charge at you, can try and fight, go into a searching pattern if they've lost sight of you. And bearing in mind that they're asking this quite frequently, can I see the Master Chief? No. Can another character nearby see the Master Chief and tell me where he is? No. Okay, we need to search for him, but we know he's here somewhere because he just killed Bob. And we were all quite attached to Bob. He was one of our favourite, elites. Not the brutes, nobody likes the brutes. And then, of course, you can see that actually the search has even more complexity built into that. So you can start kind of going through the environment. And then if you can see here in the pre-search, actually, if it does find you, what it's trying to do in the pre-search is it might be going, right, if I'm actually going to search for him, maybe I can throw a grenade in and put in some suppressing fire and then push up and try and force the player into a bad position. And then you're like, oh God, oh God, oh God. And then like those two elites come by and the hunter behind them. You're like, oh, fuck. Boom. And then you're dead. And so it all largely runs off that. That's pretty much their system. That's how it works. But there's a lot of kind of intricacies and kind of complexity attached to it. So the first thing is that in Halo 2, they introduced what's known as styles. And that was to try and manipulate the accessibility of the tree. So if I go back to that example there, hunters can't get in vehicles. It'd be kind of funny if they did. It's like gets in a warthog. I'm coming for you. You know. And also certain characters like elites and hunters don't retreat. They're actually far more aggressive. Typically hunters have no real variation in their behavior at all beyond the kind of basic charging and what have you. But elites will, if they're kind of diminished to like very low health, will sometimes charge you, as do brutes. Meanwhile, like things like the grunts, they'll actually run away. They panic, they run away from you. So, and you can't see this very well in this image, but this is actually lifted from some of the original talks that Bungie gave. It's that based on what type of character it is, certain parts of the tree get removed. It actually just kind of says, right, you can't do these because this is the type of character you are. So it blocks certain parts of the subtree and says, you can't do this because it's not part of your repertoire. But it allows them to continue to use what is the same overarching system. In addition, and this is something in a wee second, the context of what's happening in the game can cause certain things to turn on and off. So, for example, if we have a look again at this, the engage subtree, if the player is actually in a vehicle, you don't charge him, unless you're maybe a hunter. Because that makes no sense whatsoever. Guy's coming up in his warthog, he's feeling pretty good about himself, he's got a little guy at the back as his gunner, and you go, I know what, ah! So that's disabled at runtime because it goes, Master Chief is in a vehicle, and you go, oh, that's not a good thing to do anymore. But conversely, if Master Chief wasn't in a vehicle, it'd go, well, that actually might be a good idea, so let's try and do that. Now, when it actually decides how to do this, what's happening is that depending on which character it is and what either that character or other characters or even the player are doing, this can actually disable certain parts of that tree. But then how does it decide which action to make? It's not just like a coin toss. It doesn't just decide I'm going to do that one and what have you. We'll come back to that. But what it's doing is it actually sets a priority. So what it creates is, in programming terms, it's a priority list. And it says that each behavior, like here, each behavior actually has a priority at that point in time based upon what's happening around it. So we kind of look at all these possibilities, and probably things like being idle has a very low priority, because the Master Chief has just killed Bob, he's going to kill Fred, and that guy we don't like over there, he's about to get it as well. You go, right, well, being idle is a really bad thing right now. So that has a very low priority. But conversely, retreating. And so it orders them based upon these perceived priorities. And this is kind of calculated quite frequently throughout the game. But like I say, sometimes the context of this can shift. So yeah, attacking seems like a really good idea now until, oh God, he's just got in a ghost. Suddenly attacking now doesn't seem like a good idea because the context of that behavior has shifted. And you go, well, shit, right, okay. No, that's not going to be a good idea. Let's flip into a defensive. Suddenly these priorities completely change. And it happens very, very quickly. And this is how they are trying to be reactive in their behavior. And they're going, no, 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 bad idea, bad idea, bad idea. Change my mind. I'm going to run. I'm going to run like fuck. I'm going to get the hell out of here. And so you'll see that sometimes if they're running towards you. Now, depending, some of them will just run away because they go, oh God, he's got in a vehicle. But others will say, I'm going to try and knock him out the vehicle. And it's notably the elites that try and do that. So if you get in a ghost and you start trying to drive away, the elites will actually jump on top of it and try and kick you off because they're feeling far more confident about it. So like I say, priority of which decision to make happens very frequently, but what's important and what isn't changes very, very rapidly. So, like I said, in Halo 2, they had these style system, and that was quite useful. But in 3, they actually change it a little bit, and it's what's called behavior masks. So there's not only the certain accessibility based upon what's happening right now. Can I get in that vehicle? No, because that guy isn't getting in the vehicle. Can I try and, well, should I retreat? Should I attack? Things like that. But then they were also tweaked slightly based upon what the mood is of the character. And there were 3 types of behavior masks. And what they did was they overlaid them on top of that tree and then said, okay, so here's maybe some extra behaviors that you're allowed to do, because instead of being a normal grunt, you're an angry grunt. Or instead of being a regular elite, you're maybe a timid elite. And that could happen sometimes. You would see behaviors that were sort of out of kilter. And the most obvious one was the suicide grunt that appears in later games. It'll run at you with sticky grenades because it's more aggressive in its behavior. It's more willing to try and take you out rather than doing what grunts typically do, which is run away in a panic. So this was them trying to figure out how to kind of inject more and more variety into the system, because they said, well, it's all right having this static tree and then we can turn off bits of it based on context. But there are certain behaviors that I don't want a certain type of character to do for about 90% of the game, except from very particular circumstances. And that's where the behavior masks became quite useful. Now, I kind of pretty much covered that. It's always kind of checking at any given point in time whether the action's applicable and whether the actions are more important, and that the context continually shifts. I pretty much did all this. I completely forgot what order I did my slides in. But like I said, they've continually reevaluated. So these behavior trees are happening very, very quickly. And sometimes it'll just stick with it. And it goes, you know what, I'm fine. I'm just going to continue shooting the Master Chief until he shoots me. But in other cases, like that behavior will shift very, very quickly based upon what's happening around them. And like I said, the most obvious example is when you kill an elite in front of a bunch of grunts. Now, that can actually be done in a really interesting way, because this is the problem that particular type of behavior has, because a grunt can be in the middle of an engage subtree, and it goes, right, I'm engaging, I'm charging, or I'm throwing a grenade, or I'm fighting, maybe I'm guarding a position, and it has to jump entirely from wherever it is over there to that flee behavior up in the retreat subtree. That's not easy to do, because typically it should actually complete all the other behavior it had in that tree and propagate back up, and then reevaluate the state. And that can take, quite a lot of time to actually achieve. And this is where what Halo 2 had developed was what's called the stimulus system. And what it does is it triggers a very sudden change in the world. Now, for the programmers, this could be easy to understand if I just say it's event-driven programming. There's a couple of people going, yep, yep, yep. In short, what that means is an event occurs and it actually just yells at the behavior tree and goes, this happened! And goes, okay, I need to respond to this event. And this can happen for a whole range of different reasons in the game, but it's their way of ensuring this reactive gameplay occurs, that it just goes, I don't care what you're doing, drop it. But I was in the middle of doing this nice little animation as he ran over to cover over here. Don't matter. Not relevant anymore. You need to reevaluate. Why do I need to reevaluate? That elite or that hunter is dead. Oh. How do I respond to this? And so this is what it's actually happening, is that outside of the behavior tree, there's this stimulus system. And it's actually just a bunch of event handlers, and it pays attention to certain events that happen in the world. And things such as like characters being kind of pushed into a particular corner. Even something simple as a grunt, I think it's one of the brutes in Halo 3. If the brute loses all its armor, it immediately goes into an aggressive stance and charges you. So whatever it was doing a minute ago, not important anymore. You're now at your last life. Do what you're supposed to do when you're in that sort of last stand kind of context, and it goes, I'm going to take you out. So this was always the problem with the brutes in 2 and 3, is when you wear them down, they then charge at you. And that's what's happening. They're responding to this event that's happened in the world where it goes, screw this, Leroy! And just goes for you, but then you just melee him in the head or something like that, and he's gone. But the obvious one is when the leader dies. So if there's a particular group of characters and the leader dies, this event is then propagated to every grunt in local proximity. Was the elite just died. And that's when they all immediately drop whatever it was they were doing and they jump into that flee. So that's why you saw that earlier. As soon as that elite was dead, all the grunts just went, fuck! Shit! But they don't reevaluate at that point because they stay in that behavior. You'll note they never come out of it. Once you put them in a retreat state, they never kind of calm down. They never go, okay, it's all right, he's dead, I'm okay, it's all good. Oh, shit. No, they always just run around like idiots, and their job is just to die now because they've achieved what you want. So, that's me kind of gone over all the technically bit. Are we wanting a bit more Halo, or are we happy to just move on towards the end? Show of hands, who wants more Halo? Right, I think you're going to be outnumbered by the people that want to go home. Cool. So we're nearly done. But, so the thing is that system wasn't, this did not exist before Halo 2 and 3, and they actually worked quite hard on implementing this, and they've refined it quite a bit, notably between 2 and 3, and there's a lot of complexity in it that I'm actually just ignoring for the sake of this talk, because I realised that, one, talking about this stuff for a long period of time can make your head hurt, two, everybody wants to go home at some point, myself included. Now, actually, behaviour trees have become increasingly more common, and they're used in a lot of different contexts, and some in ways in which I don't think they actually originally envisaged. So one series that likes to use them a lot is the Metro series, Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light, both use behaviour trees. Amazingly, things like Just Cause, Crisis, and even Max Payne 3 all use it. The one that I still can't figure out to this day is Dark Souls. Now, I only found this out through one particular source. I found one source that says, Dark Souls use behaviour trees. My first instinct was, bullshit. Because anybody who's played any Dark Souls for any great period of time knows that the AI in it is generally appalling. It's not very good. I was like, what? I don't understand. How on earth is that? One of these days I'm going to do a Let's Play video of Dark Souls and just try and pull that apart. But right now I'm pretty much convinced that it's lies. I honestly don't believe it. Now, I know that for a fact that it's used in a lot of other games, but these are some of the few that actually publicly acknowledge and say, oh yeah, we use behaviour trees, we follow the Halo model, because we know it works really well. And other things is, it's now actually the default AI tool built into the Unreal Engine. And I could just hear, like, this sense of dissatisfaction from all the final years going, we know, yes, because Unreal Engine 4, easiest way to build your AI is you build it in a behaviour tree. And they've built all those tools into it. You can just sit there. And provided the engine doesn't crash on you at runtime, you can debug that behavior and actually see what it's doing. Everyone's going, no. In theory, you can. You should be able to. It just doesn't actually do that. But the thing is, it actually came into a lot of competition with what's known as the GOAP technique, the Goal-Oriented Action Planning System. And that was adopted in the Fear trilogy. And this was something that I talked about last term. I gave a talk about facing your fear, which was about how finite state machines use what's known as classical planning techniques to dynamically generate movement through a finite state machine. And what's happened is that those two different strands of behavior became quite popular. GOAP became very popular. Behavior trees became quite popular. So it was kind of like facing stiff competition. It's like, which one should we use? And there are benefits and drawbacks to both. And the thing is, though, we do kind of like to innovate a little bit. And what happened is quite interesting, and it may well end up being the subject of another talk at some point, that one or two games suddenly decided, oh, you know what, we're going to use something different. But the reason is because we actually really like behavior trees, and by God, this is very similar. And it's known as what's called hierarchical task network planning. And a hierarchical task network is what it's trying to do is that you're trying to build macros. So you say, so I'm getting up in the morning. What do? I get out of my bed, I go and have a shower, I brush my teeth, I maybe have something to eat, and I probably go to university because, I'm studying and I need to make sure I'm in for class and everything. Whether or not that last action's in the task network seems to vary from student to student. I'm not judging. And what it's trying to do is it builds this solution for a given problem at runtime that goes, right, here's the problem, And here's all the different macro actions that you can execute. Just figure out what the answer is for me, please. And it's based on kind of planning techniques, which I won't go back over for those of you who... The key thing is actually this image. This is a grounded hierarchical task network to solve the problem of transport. This is based on a research paper that was written by a fellow called Dana Now, a lovely gentleman who I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of years ago. And this is based on one of his papers for the SHOP 2 planner, the simple hierarchical ordered planning system. What does that look like? It kind of looks a bit like a behaviour tree. Because it's going, right, here's the route, and then there's a bunch of different paths that you can execute, and you can execute it from left to right. Now, you don't need to really understand the nitty-gritty of that, but because what it's doing is this has actually got these predicates which are telling me the current state of the world. So at the top it goes, right, I've got 2 packages, I need to transport them. And it goes, right, well, these are 2 separate tasks, transporting 2 packages, and then I know where those packages exist, I know where they need to go, and I know I've got a truck that can drive them. And it's actually figuring out how to do this concurrent action of having 2 trucks drive to a location, pick up a package, put it in the truck, and drive to its destination. That's not really that important for this case, but what's really useful about it is that it actually looks like a behaviour tree, but it's built dynamically at runtime. So this completely goes against what Bungie were doing, where they had this one big static tree and turned bits of it on and off. Instead, they're saying, right, just figure out what the tree is for this particular problem, and it goes, okay, boom. And the thing is, HTM planning is actually pretty quick. You can do this in fractions of a second. So this has become very popular, and the picture in the background is actually, it's some of the advertising artwork for Transformers Fall of Cybertron, which was developed by High Moon Studios, which is owned by Activision. Now, they were quite interesting. Now, I actually get to talk about Activision for a change. They're quite interesting because they used to use goal-oriented action planning. And they said, by God, this is actually causing us massive performance issues, because the first game, both games actually are built in Unreal Engine 3. And they realized that in order to get the fear GOP technique to work, they actually had to save the entire state space in memory, which is why if you ever go and play that game, regardless of what system it's on, it takes about a minute to load. So in the second game, they actually realized, screw this, behaviour trees look pretty good, but predating it was actually, this is what Killzone is built off of. Killzone 2, Killzone 3 all use HTN planning. And so they were like, right, hang on, they're doing something interesting over in Killzone, so maybe we should do the same thing. And that's where they decided to look into it. And subsequently, HTN planning is becoming more and more popular, both in shooter games but also in real-time strategy games, because it seems like a natural successor to behaviour trees. Because all you do is you build the actions, you build the macro actions, and then say, tell you what, just build the tree whatever way is necessary. We don't have to worry about building the tree and maintaining it. It's built itself dynamically. So this is us pretty much done, but as far as I'm concerned, the way that I see it, that the Halo games can only really begin to kind of increase in the kind of complexity of them as the games move on. I think that Halo 4 doesn't really push the bounds that much. What was interesting to me was I actually thought the level design of Halo 4 was actually tighter. They kept bringing things in. It wasn't actually as broad and as expansive as the first couple. It seemed as if they were kind of taking a little bit of guidance from the Call of Duty approach, which is the explosive corridor. Bunch of explosions on either side. I am here, I need to be over there. But they were still using the same systems. I'd like to see them kind of, expand it out a little bit. But ultimately, as far as this talk's concerned, I've only just started talking a little bit about how it works, and there's so many other things under the hood, but I might come back to that at another time. And with that, we are done. Thank you.